tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Show, and I am covering the Rowdies this week with my ever faithful co-host, Carlos. How are you doing this week up in D.C.?
James, I'm doing great up here. I'm doing great. My family, thankfully, is okay. Tampa Bay area was very much spared this past weekend, or I guess last week. It's hard to, I guess, talk about anything else from the past week, to be honest, because that was such a big point of concern for me with this hurricane coming through. But like I said, my family's okay. Felt a little helpless up here in DC. Very strange sensation being away from my family like that, just kind of checking in constantly. But apart from that, class has been going well. The Georgetown soccer team, men's and women's soccer, both trending up, which is great to see here. But the topic we're here to discuss, the Tampa Bay Rowdies, I will say made my weekend very, very bright, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. James, how about yourself? How are you doing?
Yeah, as you said, the hurricane is probably the biggest talking point. I work in insurance for anyone who is unaware, so I'm going to be very busy. But yeah, other than that, it's okay. My roommates and I stayed up because we were trying to make sure if there was any damage that we were there to fix, any broken windows or anything. But we were very lucky in that we didn't have any broken windows. We didn't have any roof problems. Nothing really happened on our street that was too bad, other than, a couple of big branches down, and we avoided the worst of it. But obviously, we feel for everyone who is suffering. There are probably some members of the Rowdies family, and certainly people, regardless of their soccer affiliation, who are suffering, and that's never a good thing. We obviously deal with people who are suffering every day. When you live in Florida, and there are lots of homeless people here who do need help, but in particular right now, there are a lot of people who don't have anything that they had just a little while ago. So keep them in your mind and do more than that if you can. Please give some time and some money. We'll get back to that in a little bit later on tonight. But let's focus on what we're here to talk about, Carlos. We are here to talk about the Rowdies because we have a couple of games to cover, actually. Due to the hurricane, we had a week off to get ourselves all set up for that. So thank you, producer Eureka, for making sure that everybody was getting as safe as they could be, obviously. But that means that we have to cover the games that we missed. On Friday, 2 weeks ago, the Rowdies drew at home versus Birmingham Legion 1-1. Kind of disappointing there. But then you look at the next game. Last night, the Rowdies won away against Monterey Bay 2-1 in California. Good stuff there, Really, really surprising result for me, but we're going to move on and we're going to discuss both of them. Now, neither Carlos nor myself get any points for the game against Birmingham Legion. We both predicted a win there, so that is unfortunate. But Carlos does get a point for predicting a win away to Monterey Bay, while I predicted a draw. And he is closing in on me despite the head start that I had. Not great on my end. But yeah, we will discuss that a little bit more next week, I think, because that will obviously be a better forum for it, considering the amount of games that are left. Now, we do have one game this week to preview, and weather has factored into our schedule, but it will not for this upcoming week. We will talk about that a little bit more as we go. And as we get through everything, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. And of course, please like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Now, what we're going to do, because there are two games, we're going to split it up here a little bit. I'm going to take the quick recap versus Birmingham. Carlos is going to take the quick recap versus Monterey Bay, and then we will both go through questions for these games together. So to start that against Birmingham, let's go to the 11, and that was Phil Breno, Jordan Scarlett, Connor Antley, Aaron Guillen. Then in front of them, Sebastian Dalgard, Lawrence Wyke, Lewis Hilton, and out on the left fullback was actually Leo Fernandez. Very surprising based on what we've seen for the last couple of weeks. Not something that Neil Collins necessarily wanted to have to do and use in there, but that's the way that it pans out, unfortunately. Then Jan Ecker was more in front of them, kind of operating as a number 10, but obviously he would move about the field. And then up top were Sebastian Guenzati and Steven Dos Santos. After Birmingham went up early, we quickly answered back through Leo Fernandez. Obviously a very good response, but we probably don't want to be giving up those early goals. However, after that, we could not up our game, and we were unable to score again, unfortunately. So the game ended in that 1-1 draw that I was talking about. Birmingham also came close a few times, despite mostly sitting back against us, while we did have, I would say, probably more of the better chances. And now I will turn it over to Carlos to cover Monterey Bay before we move into our questions.
For sure. Let me hop into this and start with the starting 11 for this game against Monterey Bay. This was Breno's, again, second consecutive start following CJ Cochran's injury. Scarlett, Antley, and Guillen made up the main part of the back line, with Dalgard, Wyke, Hilton, and Leo Fernandez making up the midfield in front of them. Ekra played as sort of an attacking midfield behind Sebastian Guinzotti and Jake LaCava, sort of two striker formation that we've dabbled around with, played with that formation against Birmingham as well. And it seems to be something that Neil Collins is drifting towards as we head into the playoffs here in a little bit. So again, the opposition was the side that started on the front foot off a very, very silly mistake from Lawrence Wyke, who just totally misplayed a pass back. He did that in the first half, but the second half, we scored 2 goals, one of which was a banger of a volley from Nicky Law, his first goal for the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and a beautiful, beautiful Wyke header off a great Leo Fernandez cross to make up for Wyke's mistake after a couple of substitutions, which really seemed to change up the dynamic of the second half. This was truly, truly one of those, stereotypical game of two halves type of game. Very great performance in the second half for the Rowdies. Not so great performance in the first half. We'll break that down here in a little bit. Last thing from this game, Jake Arman came back in a very positive sign, I think. I believe it is his first game back since his injury a little while ago. So great to see him back on the field. Obviously going to be a huge asset going into this last stretch of the season. Leo Fernandez, though, for the first time, in, at least since I can remember, actually got sent off at the end of the game. He received a red card after a very, very strange set of events where there was a restart of play. The ref was giving the ball to the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and all of a sudden one of the Monterey Bay players came in and out of nowhere stole that ball. Leo Fernandez seemed to take offense to that and went in. Studs up. Very, very aggressive, very untypical, uncharacteristic of Leo Fernandez. But I will say, personally, I do understand where he was coming from with that. Very strange play. Unfortunate to see him sent off. We'll get into the implications of that here in a little bit when we preview the next game, given that he will be suspended for most probably just that game. So we'll see what happens here. But anyway, let's go back to the Birmingham game, James. Let's talk about that one for a little bit. To be honest, not that excited to talk about this one. I really, really, really loved this game against Monterey Bay, and I'm so looking forward to discussing that. But let's talk about this one real quick and see what happened. It feels like an eternity ago against Birmingham. James, how did that game against Birmingham go such that we could not pull off that win at home against a good Birmingham team, but a Birmingham team that I think we expect to win against, especially at home?
Yeah, it was a little weird in that sense. I think that everybody was expecting that we would be able to get 3 points here. It certainly would have helped us out in the standings.
Right.
But that's true of every win that we didn't get, obviously. So let's go through that a little bit more. I just wanted to start off this section by saying this is actually the starting lineup and formation that I predicted before the season started. Last year, we had a pretty consistent lineup for a good portion of the season. There was a little bit of switching, especially on the wingback position, but when we got to the preseason, we were talking about what we expected to see, what we thought it might look like for the Rowdies to hopefully go on and challenge for the title again. And this is what I expected that would look like, because these are the players who seem to be doing it on the most regular occasion last season. So that was a weird little detail that I wanted to make sure we talked about, because it is a little bit important that there are a lot of players playing in good positions based on what we saw them in last year. So moving forward into the game itself, There were a lot of interesting tactics here. So I think the Rowdies played pretty well in terms of setting themselves up. Unfortunately, there were some problems with what they did. Birmingham Legion did sit back pretty much the whole of the first half. They weren't really trying to maintain possession, to maintain the ball. What they really wanted to do is defend us, stop us from scoring, and then get the ball, if they could, up to their target man, Juan Agudelo, who was kind of an outlet up top. And if he got the ball, then he would try to hold on to it, get into space. And if he could do that, then, all the better for them. But it actually really worked to their benefit in the first goal that they scored. So off in the Legion goal, as they scored it, it came off of a good cross from Sebastian Dalgard, which was unfortunately cleared. And then with that clearance, Johnny Dean, the right back, beat Leo Fernandez to the ball. And in doing that, he was effectively clear. He didn't have anybody behind him. It was a little bad to see, the lack of coverage there. So moving forward into that play, Johnny Dean, like I said, he won that, and he played the ball a long way to Juan Agudelo, who was alone up top, and he beat Connor Antley off the ball. Like, he just pushed him away effectively, and then he was able to chase it into acres of space. It was really disheartening to see, in all honesty, because there were two big areas of the field where there was no one backing up the first person, who obviously lost their duel, and first Leo Fernandez and then Connor Antley. Juan Agudelo ran it down. He was getting close to the box, and then he played it across to the man who ultimately scored it. And he played it to an perfectly open man. And it was a good goal for Birmingham. It was exactly what they wanted out of the game, effectively, to sit back, defend, and break on the counter and get a good goal, which is what they did. But luckily for us, we were able to respond pretty quickly there. We had a good chance in the 14th minute off of maybe not the best free kick I would ever say that we earned, but fair enough. It was okay. And then from that, Legion actually broke again, and it went up to Juan Agudelo. Luckily, we were able to prevent that one from going in. And then afterwards, in the 17th minute, Anderson Asiedu, one of the midfielders for Birmingham Legion, he made a mistake and gave it the ball. Where we saw the best plays from the Rowdies were when Jan Ekra and Sebastian Dalgard were involved, starting the ball often from the right and then switching it all the way across the field to the left. This is something that we'll frequently see Lewis Hilton do, but I saw more than Lewis Hilton playing long balls, whether they were, over the top or on the ground. It was actually most frequently successful when it was Sebastian Dalgard and Jan Ekra doing it themselves and dribbling the ball, but keeping it on the ground and then going from side to side. So Sebastian Dalgard was the guy who started this, and he won the ball off of Asiedu. He got it to Jan Ekra. Jan Ekra then got it out to Leo Fernandez. Leo Fernandez and Jan Ekra combined at the top of the box, and Leo Fernandez, an outside of the foot finish. I mean, it was amazing to see.
So
I
beautiful.
really wish that we had won this game, because if we had gotten a better result, I feel like that goal would have stood out even more, not just online, I guess, in the Twitter sphere, but also when it comes to how we did with the team of the week and the goal of the week, all of that kind of stuff. I think that Leo Fernandez would have been up for a couple more maybe personal awards, if that had been the case. Anyway, moving on, because we weren't able to get that one. It just worked out that, Asiedu, despite his mistake, he was doing a lot of great work defensively. Birmingham weren't really building much, but they were able to continue at the back and hold us off for the rest of the game. Leo had a couple of good chances, but mostly he was stuck down the left side. He did not do a lot of what we've been seeing him do recently, which is his newly patented roving role, where he can pretty much go wherever he wants. That was definitely not the case. Like I said, Sebastian Dalgard and Jan Ekra were the best. They were responsible for the best plays most of the game. In the 37th minute, they combined well again and ended up getting it to Leo Fernandez yet again on the left. His cross was just a little too far for somebody to get onto. And then in the 38th minute, I did also want to mention that Phil Breno came up very big for us to preserve the draw. Ultimately, when you get to the end of the game, this kick save that he had was very important. So yeah, those were all pretty good talking points from the overarching plays of the game. And then the other one thing that I wanted to say is Aaron Guillen actually gave away what was a pretty clear penalty that the referee missed. So
Right.
we've talked about, a couple of missed penalties that should have gone our way in the past, but we did get the benefit of the doubt on this one, and there is no VAR, as everybody knows here. So in that sense, it actually worked to our favor. It was very interesting to see how this game played out. The Rowdies did have a lot of trouble breaking Birmingham down. They were able to do so, I think, going back to what we were talking about a couple of games ago, when you're having a lot of trouble scoring, when you're having a lot of trouble breaking a team down with your usual patterns of play, it will often come down to the individual ability of this player or that player to possibly do something just crazy and, maybe dribble one or two guys out of nowhere, draw somebody out, and then they can play them through because they were able to do that with their individual skill. That's what Leo Fernandez and Jan Ekra did, and that's how it led to the goal. It didn't really come down to a ton of our usual patterns of play, although the one that did pay off in this instance and almost paid off a couple of other times was keeping it low as they crossed the field and having Jan Ekra involved with the two wingbacks. So maybe that's something that we will see moving forward, and we can obviously talk about how it played into or did not play into the game versus Monterrey.
For sure. Yeah, this was one of those games that I try to think back to, and it's like one of those situations where for most games I can think about a couple chances where I'm like, man, like that balls really should have gone in, but there weren't any huge chances that I would say we missed, and that's just because I don't recall a ton of big chances being generated for us. Like we had a lot of possession. I'm looking at the stats again. We had 60% possession, but when it comes to shots on target, we were basically equal on the same level with Birmingham. With that much
Exactly.
I would expect us to be generating more chances than the other team. Unfortunately, Birmingham was one of those teams that was able to counterattack quickly, move the ball well, and I think that's something I want to talk about in a little bit here. But it's been a little bit concerning how I don't want to say we concede a lot of goals on the counterattack, but we give up a lot of significant chances when it comes to the counterattack. That I don't know. It feels like maybe our back line's just a little bit too slow sometimes to intercept any ball that leads to like a one-on-one opportunity or a two-on-one opportunity or whatnot. We've gotten lucky in the past, but that might be an issue going forward, especially with the playoffs looming. But I mean, again, it ended up 1-1. Only gave up the one goal, but unfortunately, only created the one goal, which, as you said, was a beauty of a goal. By the way, Leo Fernandez on the outside foot, curving that in, so difficult to do. And I say that because I try to copy that every single time I play intramural soccer, and somehow the ball ends up like 30 yards away from the goal. So I'm no Leo Fernandez. Kudos to him for that banger of a goal. But let me talk about this Monterrey Bay matchup here really quickly, James. I don't want to take up too much time, like just talking about the game again. I kind of want to break it down. So I'm going to go through this quickly. Like I said earlier, Monterrey Bay went up early. Not early, but they took the early lead. 22 minutes in. Gleedle, I've never heard of this man in my life, but he put Monterrey Bay up 1-0 off like I said, the very, very silly mistake from Lawrence Wyke. That first half, I would say Monterrey Bay pretty much outplayed us. I wouldn't say there's an area of the game where we, imposed ourselves over Monterrey Bay FC. And again, this isn't a particularly like strong team per se. They're not going to the playoffs, but they did have a pretty successful run of 5 games undefeated before their last game against Las Vegas, which was the game before our win over them. So they've been in significantly better form than they were at the beginning of the year. But again, still not a totally strong team. And it's definitely a team I would have wanted to see us make a statement over. And I think by the end of the game, we definitely did. But that first half was so slow for us. We had a lot of possession. We had more possession in the first half. Surprisingly, it didn't feel that way because Phil Breno, I think this was his coming out game here, James. Phil Breno stood on his head in a way that I have seen few Rowdies goalies do in the past, just because they haven't had to be challenged that much in that way. Breno stopped a lot of shots that could have very easily been goals. The one that's most clear at the top of my head was a set piece right after their first goal. Absolute chaos on the box. Breno gets a hand on it. Breno gets a hand on it again, kind of kicks the ball out in a last-ditch effort, and one of our defenders, who it was, is slipping my mind right now, gets the ultimate clearance on that. And I think Jake Lacava sends the ball downfield to save us from any danger there. And there was, I think he made, I want to say like 7 saves in the first half. I'm pretty sure it was 7 saves in the first half was the stat I saw at halftime, because Monterrey did not have many shots at all in the second half. Breno kept us in that game. We went into the halftime 1-0 down. Neil Collins comes out with a few subs, one of them being Nicky Law, who out of nowhere, James. Nicky Law is not somebody I ever expect to be on the score sheet, just based on the kind of player he is. He's more of a, playmaker in the midfield, but I don't know what happened, like what got into him. But Leo Fernandez puts in a beautiful cross, and Nicky Law just turns it on. Like, he looked like the Nicky Law I've seen highlight reels of back in 2014 when he played for Motherwell. Oh my goodness. What a volley from the right side. Bar down, beautiful goal, 1-1, just like that at the beginning of the second half. Lawrence White making up for his mistake a little later on. Forgetting who made that cross. It was Leo Fernandez again, actually, now that I think about it. Leo Fernandez got the 2 assists game on this particular outing. White, really, really tough angle to put a header away, but he did it perfectly, and his celebration really, really fired me up personally. It was so fun to see him get excited like that. He's a very emotional player. Awesome to see him get excited like that. His second goal of the season. So this was a game, I mentioned it earlier, very much a game of 2 halves. Second half, Rowdies came out with, much more of a fire. You could tell they were playing to win, whereas in the first half, they were very much struggling to create any chances at all, despite having a little bit more possession. In fact, they were giving up a lot of counterattack opportunities. But again, Phil Breno stood on his head and made some incredible saves to keep the game close. And he was probably the biggest factor, I think, leading up to our win, just because if he didn't have the performance he had in that first half, going into the locker room down 3-0 versus 1-0 is a significantly different situation, obviously. And the Rowdies came out very much having a chance in the game still because of him. Second half, we came out, like I said, I think I'm struggling to put my finger on who the biggest player was in that second half. The second half subs were Castellanos, Dayon Harris, and Nicky Law coming onto the field. I think Dayon Harris added another element that he always brings on. He draws like 2 players every time he makes a run. So it always creates a little bit more space. I wouldn't say he was like, the key player that half. Castellanos was a huge, huge addition on the back line. I think personally he should have started. Very much more of a traditional center back. Good to see him have a great game. But I want to mention him in particular because he played a good game, like out of the back in distributing balls as well. He was making a lot of great passes that led to some transition opportunities. But out of those 3 subs, I have to give the most credit to Nicky Law, obviously, for that goal, but also because that partnership with Lewis Hilton in that midfield was really, really fun to watch, starting to create some penetration, and that's what ultimately led us to the 2 goals. So that was a long-winded recap. I said I would keep it short. I got carried away there by harping on Nicky Law and Phil Breno in particular. Maybe I'm giving away who my man of the match will be, but I'll get into that later on. But yeah, second half, really, really great stuff. If we can play that second half, over 90 minutes, James, like this is a team that can compete for a championship. I know that Monterrey is not, again, it's not particularly the strongest team, but it's a team that's in great form. It's a team that was coming out to win because they needed 3 points to stay alive in the playoff race. It was a team that was playing in front of a sold-out crowd in Monterey Bay, their first sellout of the year. So they had everything they needed to pull out a win. They had the early lead. They had the crowd behind them. Very intense crowd, I'll say. But again, the Rowdies pulled out a very, very impressive second half, which led us to the win. So I'm fully, happy with how we played this game overall. It was one of the more satisfying results given how annoying the Monterey Bay players and some of the fans were being. Leo Fernandez obviously felt that on the field, having gotten that red card by the end of the game. But again, it is what it is. Great performance, I'll say. And Leo Fernandez, despite his red card, has to be given credit for his 2 assists on the game.
Yeah, I think that minus the red card, obviously, that is a banner day for anybody. But
Right.
let's move into a little bit more broader spectrum than just looking at individual games here. So let's look at the 2 games together and see if there were any patterns that kind of emerged here. The one thing that I will say, very similar lineup, obviously. It was almost the same between them. There was just a little difference up top. So that could factor into things. Now, Carlos, I do want to ask you, there were a lot of problems, I would say, breaking Birmingham down. Obviously, that was something that I talked about. I think that our best passages of play were when we switched the ball from side to side, but not in the way that I think Rowdies fans are used to seeing that, often through Lewis Hilton hitting a long ball. It was mostly through Sebastian Dalgard carrying the ball a little bit into the midfield, finding Jan Ekra, who would then turn, carry it the rest of the way, and find Leo Fernandez, or vice versa, but mostly going the one way. Is that something that possibly you saw against Monterey Bay, or maybe they reverted back to their old style, getting the ball across the field, or maybe that wasn't even a big thing in the rest of the game? Maybe it's more so that these games weren't actually that similar in the way that the Rowdies were trying and then able to break a team down.
No, you could definitely see some similarities. Dalgard, I think, has been this season a huge revelation for me personally. I would say he has been much more impactful this season than he was last season. His role is significantly larger. And as you said, that connection with Jan Ekra in particular, kind of like the 1-2 play and then getting Dalgard free on the wing. I wouldn't say it was that prevalent in this particular game against Monterey Bay, especially because that first half was so slow in terms of generating, like real dangerous chances. That's part of the reason that Jan Ekra was subbed out at halftime. Dalgard was in most of the game, got subbed out in 84th minute. So that, connection in particular with Dalgard and Ekra in that midfield area was not particularly prevalent. But you did see Dalgard mixing it up with Wyke in particular, with Hilton, getting free on the wing. Lots of switching it back and forth, like you said, between Fernandez and Dalgard on the wings. It has been interesting for me seeing Leo kind of not really back to where he was last year, as far back as like that wing back position, but he has been slowly kind of pushed back into the midfield more so than he has been earlier in the season, where he was playing sort of the forward role, attacking winger role. So that Leo Fernandez Dalgard connection has been a little more prevalent recently, I'd say, just because they're kind of playing along the same line on the field. So that's something I think that's going to be particularly interesting to watch. I guess not this upcoming game, though, because Leo Fernandez will be suspended for that. So we'll see who fills in there. Maybe a Dayon Harris on the left side, which would be a little interesting just because I think he's mostly a right side player. Or I guess Armin would be the guy there now that he's back. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think you're definitely making a good point in bringing up that interplay that Dalgard has been especially used in. It's been a huge asset for us. For some reason, in particular against Monterey, it was not very much dangerous as it has been in the past. But there were a couple instances, I would say, in the first half where Dalgard, I think, was kind of the generator of the only couple chances we had that half. So even, I guess, when it's not working too well, it can be a generator of attacking chances. But again, I wouldn't say as much. We weren't relying on it as much in this particular game. And eventually it worked out. So that's good to see for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, we always want positives because positives are a lot better to talk about. So, yeah, let's see now if there are any patterns between these games and any prior ones that we think we could impact us possibly more going forward. Is there anything, Carlos, that you would like to highlight here?
Yeah, I just want to mention what I mentioned earlier. I think the our vulnerability to counterattacks has been something I've noticed a little bit more recently.
Yes, yeah.
For some reason has been more of a recent problem than it was earlier in the year. But I do recall like mentioning this earlier on this season as well. We weren't getting caught out for it as much as we are now. It just feels like a lot of the goals that we've given up recently have been silly counterattack goals, poor positioning, a variety of things. In this case against Monterey Bay, it wasn't really a counterattack. It was just a silly mistake on the back. I guess Wyke was in the midfield, but almost in the back line. But in this game against Monterey Bay, even there was a couple moments of danger from quick play on the wing, us getting caught out a little bit. But I think it's more prevalent in the game against Birmingham, those counterattacks that were so dangerous. And especially in the USL, like this is a league that's pretty young. So there's going to be a lot of really, really quick guys. I mean, these are guys that will most likely be in their physical prime, guys that are 22, 23, 24, 25. Are going to be some of the fastest, are probably going to be the fastest they'll be in their lifetime around that age. So it's something that worries me sometimes with our back line, maybe not being able to keep up. I don't know. I don't know if that's something you've noticed or maybe if I'm blowing it out of proportion, but I would say in this game against Monterey, it wasn't a huge thing. But if I'm recalling correctly against Birmingham, that's really where the majority of their chances came from, right?
That is definitely where the majority of their chances came from. And one thing along those lines that I also wanted to bring up is just how frequently the other team has scored first.
Right.
This is something I remember us talking about mostly earlier in the season. I think that there was a little period where you and I did not discuss this as much. But it's a problem, unfortunately, that, we were, I guess we were kind of told about, I should say, last year before the playoffs came in. And it was okay. We obviously got away with it against Louisville City. And then it happened again in the final against Orange County, as I'm sure everybody will remember now, heartbroken as we all were. But that is every so often a recurring problem. And we might be in another swing of that. So I'm hopeful that, if we either get some defensive stability, we get, some players playing there long term, or possibly we look at something that might be a little bit better depending on the circumstances, then that could be cleaned up. But yeah, I think that is similar to what you're saying, but also a problem in and of itself.
For sure. I think I can't personally think of any other trends that have been concerning to me. I think you bring up the only other one that was pretty obvious in that conceding first theme. I will say I did notice that earlier on in the year a lot more, and it was funny because I think even when we were on that like crazy good like undefeated streak, even when we won a bunch of those games, it seemed like we were conceding first in those as well. So I don't know, it's a really interesting phenomena because I guess it's a good sign that we can bounce back from adversity if we go down 1, maybe 2 goals.
That is certainly a good thing.
Yeah, but I wouldn't personally want to be pushing our luck, especially in the playoffs. So hopefully we can straighten that out. But again, maybe you can turn that in the positive light and say that if we go down 1-0 away at Louisville or at Memphis, this is a team that's proven they can come back against good teams too. So maybe that's a way to spin that theme, that recurring phenomena positively. James, let me ask you this, because this is something I noted a couple times earlier on this season, something that I think was particularly noticeable for me in this game against Monterey, and if I recall against Birmingham as well. One of our players that I don't know, I would call him a pretty key player, at least from earlier on in the year. And now looking back at, the recap of the Birmingham game, I guess it's not particularly prevalent because he got subbed in the 73rd minute. But Jake LaCava has been much slower in production-wise than he was earlier on in the year when he was pretty much like on par with Leo Fernandez in every category and, kind of matching him blow for blow here. But recently it seems like he's been slowing down a little bit. Is this a cause for concern for Tampa Bay Rowdies fans, or is he just kind of, I don't know, can we expect him to turn it on in the right moment when playoffs come around?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a question for us as fans. I think that Jake LaCava has, all of the same tools that he
Right.
had at the beginning of the season. He hasn't faced any long injury layoffs or anything like that. So it's not a possibility necessarily that he started with something and he's got to work his way up to it. It's more just form, I guess, as opposed to anything else. And I'm not entirely sure, where a specific issue lies with that. It's just, I think, partly the nature of the type of player that he is, because when you're a player who is, effectively a dribbler, because, Jake LaCava does a lot of things, of course, but one thing that I think we all know him best for is trying to beat somebody, because he loves running at people, and that's a very important skill. Actually wanting to have the ball at your feet and take somebody on with it. It's extremely difficult to do as a defender who really likes to stay at home and never go and try and beat somebody. It's a very important skill, and it requires not just not just the ability with your foot, of course, to keep the ball close and not lose it that way, but it also requires confidence. And if you're not confident,
Right.
then possibly that is a reason. Now, in that sense, I do look at the playing time that we've got for Jake LaCava, and there's a question there of, kind of chicken or egg thing. Is he not getting as much playing time as he was at the start of the season because he's not getting these results and he's lacking confidence, or is he not as confident because he's not getting playing time? It kind of, it's hard to say. His production did slow a little bit before we got here, so possibly it would be that way. And then, it went down in terms of playing time to confidence. But yeah, I can't really say for certain without having been able to talk to him. And even if I did, who's to say that I would have the understanding to figure that that part of his game out. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see, especially for us, that he is not doing that quite as frequently and certainly not as effectively. Now, I would like to definitely see him take some players on. I think that there are 2 games coming up here that are going to be very important for this. So we are going to talk about one of these games in our preview, but just to jump ahead a little bit in the weeks, on Saturday, we're playing Loudoun United. They are an academy team, effectively, for DC United in MLS. They're not very good. They're mostly populated by kids, like legal children. But yeah, it's a possible game where a player like Jake LaCava could take somebody on and be like, yeah, no, I can beat these guys. I can beat these guys. This is good. And then you build up some confidence.
Right.
El Paso Locomotive, we'll talk about them when we get to them next week, but that would be obviously a tougher game than either Loudoun United or the last game of the season, which is at home versus New York Red Bulls. New York Red Bulls are actually the worst team in the East. So those are 2 important games, I think, for Jake LaCava to try and win himself in, get himself back into the gear that he was in the beginning of the season. Now, Sebastian Guenzati has been taking up that playing time for the most part, and he's been definitely building his confidence, but that hasn't turned into as many goals, certainly, as last season, as we're used to seeing from Sebastian Guenzati. It's kind of a conundrum here. If you're choosing one or the other to put on, then whom are you putting on if you want to get results, like, points on the board?
Right.
Yeah, it's got to be, I'm assuming, just who's got the hot hand in training. And I don't know, who's got the hot hand in training necessarily, but between one having possibly lower confidence or not, one having, more confidence but still not scoring as many, I just want one of them to start, getting a little streak going, whether that's Sebastian Guenzati, Rowdies legend, whether that's Jake LaCava, someone who isn't necessarily a Rowdies legend, but he's had a very good season for us, and I'm sure that he's got a very good future in the game. I just want one of them to start putting it together at the right point of the season, because that is so important. Whether it doesn't matter what tournament you're dealing with, if you've got somebody with a hot hand, that's good.
Yeah, and I'll save my comments on the Loudoun game for when we get to that in a few minutes here. But I fully agree with you that game is going to be very, very important for, I think, more than anything, confidence, like you said, offensive confidence more than anything, because especially with Leo Fernandez not available for that game, he's not going to be able to generate goals like at that same pace that he has been just every game. So I don't think we can reasonably expect him to do that every game in the playoffs. Other players are going to have to step up. Our strikers are going to have to step up. And I don't know. We'll get to the Loudon game in a second, but like I said, that's going to be huge for confidence. So last question I'll put out there, less of a question, I think more of a comment, and somebody I want to highlight more than anything. Phil Breno, I mentioned him earlier, but such a strange sensation for him it must be to come down here on loan behind CJ Cochran, who's in a really good set of games, good form. Cochran gets injured, and Breno, who comes from third division Forward Madison, all of a sudden gets his chance to start for one of the best teams in the USL Championship. That's got to be a pretty scary step up, I would say, especially for such a young guy such as himself. And this game against Monterey Bay, I mean, I don't know what the situation is going to be with the goalies if we go out and get an emergency backup. I don't know how that works for the playoffs. But personally, James, after seeing this performance against Monterey Bay at a hostile environment, at a sold-out crowd, in a game where we're down 1-0 and he concedes early, seeing how he bounced back and the energy he showed, the emotion he showed, this is a guy that, based on if I don't look at anything else, I'm just looking at this game, this is really a guy that I'm excited to see lead us in the playoffs. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but obviously CJ Cochran won't be able to join us for the playoffs, at least on the field. I'm relatively confident about what Phil Breno brings to the table here. Am I getting ahead of myself, James, or are you sharing that sentiment a little bit?
No, I think that one thing that I highlighted in the game review for Birmingham was a very important kick save from Phil Breno too. So it's not like this is something that is an aberration necessarily. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up with Phil Breno is when he came in on loan, we sent Rico Arozarena out on loan so that he could get playing time. Fair enough. I understand that.
Right.
Now, Phil Breno was playing for one of the better teams in USL League One. So, what's the difference between USL Championship and USL League One? I would say there's a pretty good difference, but at the same time, for goalkeepers, it might not be as crazy because as a goalkeeper, obviously, most teams only have one goalkeeper that they use all season. Now, the Rowdies have somehow gone through three. That is very uncommon. But when you look at it, if you're not going to be a starter in USL Championship, you might as well just drop to USL League One, get some playing time. And I'm not sure what Phil Breno's decision was when it comes to giving up that playing time to move up to the Rowdies, but he's been a consummate professional since then. And now that he has a chance, he can show that possibly League One is not where he belongs, but in the Championship. And I think that he's obviously eager to prove that. Most players would be, of course. And the one other thing that I will say for goalkeeping is Rico Arozarena is with Forward Madison. As we know, Forward Madison is currently not in a playoff spot for USL League One. Does that mean he comes back and joins us early and we get another, a backup? Whether that's Breno or Arozarena, I don't know. But I'm happy with the starter, at least for now. I would definitely like a backup to be present. But, for the time being, I think that it's not too bad. And, Phil Breno has earned at least the confidence enough for me to say, let's keep him in there. I don't know. Don't put Sebastian Guenzati in that or something.
For sure. Although I will say, at least for raw entertainment value, seeing Guenzati in goal would be very, very interesting. But James, you make a great point there. It's not even something I considered with Ford Madison not being in playoff position. Rico coming back early definitely seems very, very possible, if not even likely. Maybe not. But I don't know. Who knows with that situation? I don't know how loans work. But we'll see what happens there. I know in the past we've seen teams go out right before playoffs and pick up emergency goalies and whatnot. Very, very curious as to how the contracts for that kind of thing works. Maybe if the USL is listening to me, I'd like an internship in the future, maybe in the law department, contracts. We'll see how that works, get some inside information.
There you go.
Anybody at USL HQ is listening, shoot me an email. You know how to reach me. I'm on Twitter. Anyway, let's move on from that. Let's talk about man of the match, James. I'm just going to go ahead and say mine really quickly because I feel like I've been teasing my pick this whole time. For the game against Birmingham, this one was one I definitely did not tease or anything, but I'm going to take Lewis Hilton. I think Lewis Hilton was, as always, a huge part of our offensive production and whatnot. In this game, it's hard not to take Leo Fernandez as well, just because of his, banger of a goal. But I think Lewis Hilton was probably the most overall influential throughout the game, especially in a game like this. He plays a huge role in keeping the team composed and creating opportunities. So shout out to Lewis Hilton. And then for this game against Monterey Bay, obviously I'm going to pick Phil Breno. Really impressed with his performance. Incredible saves and really tough spots. Great emotion from him. Love to see that from him, especially for such a young guy who I guess hasn't really had much time to shine. So shout out to him. Great performance. Looking forward to seeing what he can do.
All right. Well, I like those picks. And for me, for the Birmingham Legion game, I chose Sebastian Dalgard. I mentioned him quite a few times, and he was involved in a lot of the buildup that I liked. It was between him and Jan Ekra for me, actually. I know that Leo Fernandez, as you said, scored that beautiful goal, but I think that the best plays of the game were developed between Ekra and Dalgard. So I went with Dalgard overall. He seemed like the guy who was most involved in the starting of those plays at the very least. And then for the second game, I wanted to go between a couple of players here because Lawrence White scored the winning goal, but he also had a huge mistake, something that we had talked about. Leo Fernandez got an assist on both goals, but then he got himself what you might term a silly red card at the end of the game, something that actually won't really impact us too much just because our next game is against Loudoun United, but you have to call that kind of lucky as opposed to smart. So the other goal was Nicky Law, and I think in that sense, Nicky Law won it over for me, and he is my man of the match for the game last night against Monterey Bay.
For sure. Great pick. I think I could pick him exclusively based on the fact that he scored a goal of the week. Maybe, I don't know about goal of the season, but it could be a contender, but definitely a goal of the week contender at that. So shout out Nicky Law for such a great performance last night. Okay, James, I'm going to run through the standings here really quickly, and then we can hop into our preview of this upcoming game against Loudoun United, which I guess is always a fun game. I mean, it'll be exciting for sure. Hopefully we can run up the score, but we'll get into that here in a second. I'm getting out of myself. Let's get into the standings here. Louisville City stays atop of the East, unfortunately, with 66 points from 32 games played. Memphis is in second with 61 points from 31 games played, and we stayed in third with 58 points from 31 games. The win against Monterey goes very far in us, I think, sort of locking up at least that third place spot, and at best sort of staying in the fight for second place if things begin to go wrong for Memphis. After that, Birmingham did not improve on points with 55 from 32 games played. We do have a game in hand on them, so that's why I mentioned the fact that we kind of starting to lock in that spot at least. Pittsburgh, Detroit City, and the Miami FC all stayed within striking distance of better spots this weekend. Then we move over to the West, where we have San Antonio still sitting atop of the league with a very impressive 73 points. Only 4 draws and 5 losses this year. 23 wins for San Antonio. Very impressive on their part. Then they have San Diego Loyal SC behind them in second place with 59 points. Behind them, you have Colorado Springs, Sacramento Republic, El Paso, New Mexico, and RGV rounding out the playoff spots. Switchbacks and Sacramento Republic are also I totally messed that up. Switchbacks are in third place. Forgive me for that. And I believe that rounds out the playoff positions with Sacramento Republic and Colorado Springs after this weekend securing their playoff positions. So things starting to finally come into playoff picture getting unblurred here, getting a very clear vision for who's going to be in the playoffs and who's not going to be in the playoffs, especially in the East. I think it's pretty much been settled. It's just a matter of I guess where teams finish, what seeds they'll finish with. below the Rowdies. It's pretty close. So going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Some important games coming up across the league. We'll see how that plays out. Really quickly, instead of plugging the shop as we usually do here, I want to make a note to please check out the links we have in the show's description, wherever you're listening. Check our description. We have links to the American Red Cross and Feeding Florida in the description of the shows of this episode of RBLR Sports. Please take some time if you can, if you're in a position to do so, click on those links and donate as much as you can for the Hurricane Ian efforts, the Hurricane Ian relief efforts here. Obviously, such a huge part of our Florida community, of our state, has taken significant damage. We all likely know at least one or two people who have taken some serious damage, possessions, houses, whatnot. Yeah, it was a historic hurricane. We mentioned it earlier. I mean, it took up most of my thoughts, and that's that our area got spared for the most part. So if you can, please take a chance, take a couple seconds to look at those links, donate if you can, if you're in a position to do so, and help out those relief efforts. It would be great to get as much of the Rowdies family in on that. This is a community that I've seen in the past raise a lot of money for noble causes, and I think this is a great time for us to rally around, especially the Southwest Florida area, and support them here. With that being said, James, why don't you take the preview here of this upcoming game against Loudoun United? Like I said, actually, like you said, this is a team that more often than not has at least a few, children, legal defined children under 18. Always going to be a really interesting game when they come around. Always feels a little weird heckling this team because of that.
Yeah.
But whatever. Take it over here. Let's see what we got going on in this game against Loudoun United.
As they say, you play the team in front of you, not the team you want. But
Exactly.
yeah, let's move into that preview then. So Loudoun are a bad team in this league. Let's just get that out of the way. Even if they are essentially what is kind of the best of the worst in the East right now. There are a couple teams down at the bottom, and they are at the top of those who are like still struggling all the time. But yeah, that's fine because, as we said, we shouldn't take them lightly. They're always spirited, of course. And you pointed out that they're going to be fast and energetic because they are younger players, and that's usually what we're dealing with when we're dealing with younger players. However, we should always remember where they are in the table and what the roster is probably going to look like here. So 4 losses in the last 5 games. The fact that we're at home, I kind of think that, this is all pointing in one direction, and in one direction which it had better go that way, quite frankly. But yeah, let's keep going here with this preview. Their recent rosters have all been academy players and some recent college grads. That makes sense. It is similar to what we've been saying. DC United have a pretty good academy, not the best in MLS, but they produce some pretty good players, and they want to give them a professional platform to try and grow themselves from the youth ranks into the actual professional game. They're going to need to play against grown men. We're going to throw them around most likely and, see what it's like in that situation and kind of learn to handle themselves. So we are going to be the grown men doing that this week, the Rowdies players. And we should note that their top scorer is Tyler Freeman. He has 8 goals on the season. Their top assister is Skaga Simonsen with 7 on the season. So those are 2 players to keep an eye on. But I think that, frankly, we should be able to shut them down, and we should be able to shut them out, because that is the nature of the 2 teams and the gulf in class. These are players who are fighting for their professional careers, though. Anyone who is a recent college grad on this team, either, this is a team where they get noticed somewhere else, or they might have to move into accounting, or they might have to move into some other financial field. A lot of players end up there. They might have to move into something coaching, all of that. Those are common areas. But if they want to stay in professional soccer, this is the season that they do it. If you look at Timmy Mell, Timmy Mel was playing for DC United last year on the Loudon team. He was not with DC United in MLS, but he did well enough that the Rowdies said, hey, let's give this guy a contract and see how he does. Now, he didn't do obviously too much for us in the championship this year. We sent him out on loan to USL League One, and he's been doing pretty well on and off for Chattanooga Red Wolves there. But yeah, this is what they want. This is what those players want. There are a lot of guys on this team who, they'll be happy to stick it out with Loudoun United naturally, because that is still a professional team and it is a professional contract. But that's not what any player wants, really, is to be on an academy team for their professional career. They want to make a move to the Rowdies, to Louisville City, to Phoenix, Sacramento, whoever you want. But this is what they are. That is what they're shooting for. And these are the last couple games of the season. They're going to be fighting do or die for them in the professional arena. And that's kind of the way that you have to look at it with them. A lot of them really do not want to, have to say, all right, well, I gave it my shot and I got to give it up. A lot of them are going to keep trying to move on, and they should obviously get every chance, but this is one of those chances. And we are going to have to keep that in mind for this game. The gulf in talent should be huge, but there are always problems naturally. The other thing that I really think is going to play into our benefit is the experience that this team has was going to factor in when it comes to game management. If they are playing with such a chip on their shoulder as I honestly expect them to for their last couple games, then we should be pretty capable of riling them up, let's say. But anyway, it would be a good game to, frankly, smack this team before the playoffs, get a boost in our confidence. There's another one coming up here, New York Red Bulls 2 at home as well, and that's going to be a similar type of game. 3 points is must win in this game, not because we need it for the standings, although we do, but if we can't beat this team, that's gonna kind of drag on the players. So I would rather we go out there, we just put 4 past them like they lost to Detroit City this past weekend. Let's just do that and have it over with. So let's move into the predictions here. Carlos, if it's all right with you, I'm going to go ahead and go first, and I'm going to say, as everybody knows from Twitter, somebody likes to call it out. Shout out to Mitch Loster, 4-1 to the Lads.
Not a bad, I guess here for this game. Usually I'm like, I love the 4-1 to the Lads mantra. I feel like it never actually works out, but I feel like this is definitely a game where it could actually go that way. So I'd love to see that happen. I'm going to go, I think, I'm going to take a 3-0 win. Yeah, for all the reasons you said, I just feel like this could be a game where we, build some confidence back. Back line feels good about themselves. Gets a shutout.
I would like to see a shutout.
Yeah, I think it's best of both worlds situation here. A 3-0 win would be very, very nice, and I think very, very reasonable given Loudoun's recent form. Although I guess looking back, they did get that 3-0 win against Hartford September 21st, which is kind of random. So good for them, I guess. It's fun. But like you said, they did just lose 4-0 at home to Detroit City. So we'll see what happens. I think, like you said, it'd be pretty disappointing if we don't get a win here. It'd be, I think pretty disappointing if we don't win by a few goals.
Yes,
So
exactly.
we'll see what happens. But with that being said, I think we can wrap up the preview of the Loudoun United game. I mean, not much else to say there. It should be a fun game, at least for us. Yeah, let's move into our extra time segment here. As I mentioned earlier, definitely do what you can to help out people who have been suffering due to this hurricane last week. Like I said, check the description of the episode of this podcast. There are a couple links in there for you to donate. If you're in a position to do so, definitely please do that. Also, congratulations to Haji Berry on his move to Egypt. I saw that on Twitter today. James, great point to note that here. Biggest transfer fee for I don't want to say ever, because I'm not sure what ever is. Is it the league? Is it for Colorado Springs, James? Do you know?
So my understanding what it was that it is the biggest transfer fee in USL Championship history.
Okay.
They did not disclose it, so it's not like we can, base it off of something here. But if you look at the transfers abroad, there was Kobe Henry. He went to Stade Reims in France. There was Jose Gallegos, who went to a team in Denmark whose name is possibly Sonderjysk, or maybe it's something entirely different. I don't have the best Danish pronunciation, you can tell. But there are a couple of other moves that have happened abroad, and I'm assuming, obviously, that none of them comes close to this. So Hadji Barry, he deserves this. He has had 2 very good goal scoring seasons here in a row. That's also based on a larger body of work than just those 2 seasons. I don't think a team in Egypt's top division is going to spend whatever money they have to break a record. Egypt is not the wealthiest league in the world, as much as I'm sure that there are some pretty wealthy people owning those teams. I think that Hadji Barry has earned this for himself. And the other thing that I want to point out for this is not just well done to Hadji Barry or the USL Championship itself, but this bodes well for any player who is not quite at MLS level, let's say, but still thinks that they have a good future in the game. If you look at the players who have been able to move abroad in recent years, again, those guys that I mentioned, Kobe Henry and Jose Gallegos, 2 U.S. men's youth national team players, there is a proven pathway. Now you look at players who are a little bit older, and there is also a proven pathway for them. It might not be straight to the English Premier League. It might not be even to France's League One, as it was for Kobe Henry if you're an older guy. But Junior Flemings moved from the USL Championship to Toulouse, who were in France's League Two at the time, and they've been promoted since then. So he is actually playing in France's League One. There is a pathway. If you are not able to make it to the MLS level right out of college, or let's say that you are not a college player, but you are still looking for a similar place to play, there are multiple reasons to come to the USL Championship. You get the stability that happens to be the case in the U.S. Sports League. That might be better than, I don't know, playing in Nicaragua at times. That might be better than playing in the Democratic Republic of Congo at times. That might be better than playing in I don't know, somewhere in the East Indies. I don't know what the contracts are like there, but if you get the relative stability of living in America, maybe that's appealing to a lot of people. I'm sure, obviously, that it would be, but just because of differences in the legal support here. But in addition to that, if you want to make it as a soccer player, you can get a pretty good salary. Naturally, you can get a salary and a chance to move up in the soccer world. And I think that's really important. Every player who's ever played a game, you hate when you lose, you hate when you get cut from a team. Everyone is competitive, and that's how they made it to this level that they're playing at, is they were competitive, and they want to test themselves at the highest level they can. Well, the Egyptian Premier League is more than likely better than the USL Championship, and Hadji Barry has done himself very well to make this move, and he's going to show other people that if I can do this, you can do this too. I'm not the only player who's ever going to score that amount of goals. I'm not the only guy who's ever going to be able to go to Egypt and succeed. I think even Deshaun Brown, who Rowdies fans might well know, he has played in the Egyptian Premier League. Damian Lowe, who is another player that Rowdies fans might know, he played in the Egyptian Premier League, and from there he moved actually on to MLS. So there are all sorts of pathways. Not every single one of them goes straight to the top, like Christian Pulisic, let's say. A lot of players are going to take winding paths, and if you can do it for yourself in a way that works, then I would say consider the USL Championship, because there are a lot of benefits, and don't forget that you can make it.
I like that. It's a good message to end that note on. Thank you for that, James. I appreciate that, making me want to go out there and try out for, like, I don't know, Loudoun United. Who knows? Anyway, moving on from that, you make a note here, a good note, to mention that we have to see how this goalkeeping situation for us is going to work out, especially with this roster freeze coming up. James, I don't know about you. I think it's pretty likely that we'll go out and find a backup goalie right before playoffs. It's been done before. I know it's possible. I know there's that emergency goalie stipulation and whatnot. Have you, because I will say personally for me, I haven't done much research into this, but have you looked at any potential options of any teams that might be out of the playoff race? Or am I getting too ahead of myself here with that question?
Well, I mean, there are definitely plenty of teams who are out of the playoff race. It just kind of comes down to who they would be willing to give up, because, you know, there are still 3 games left for us. I believe for most teams, as it stands, there are probably 2 games left, but there are still definitely teams that won't want to give up their backup player. Maybe they have 3 goalkeepers on the roster and they'd be willing to switch things around. I can't say that I'm, you know, particularly familiar with everybody's backup goalkeeper for
Right.
the USL Championship. As much as I know Ross, as much as I think I know rosters pretty well, I definitely don't know that I can name them off the top of my head. But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking that if Reiko Rosarena, you know, if Forward Madison shows that they are out of the playoffs, which I think that they are, then I was thinking that you could recall players who are out on loan, but I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't think that it is necessarily, but I think that would obviously be the first option if we can call in that loan, so to speak. We'll have to see. I hope that the Rowdies will be able to pull something out of their secret bag of tricks, because we need it. It's not that, you know, it's not that Sebastian Guenzati, who is supposedly the backup to Phil Breno right now, is a bad soccer player or a bad athlete, but is he a goalkeeper? I think everybody listening can answer that for themselves.
Sure. For sure. It'll be interesting to see. I know, like I said, I've seen it in the past. Those last second goalie acquisitions are always interesting. I don't know. I mean, like I said, Phil Breno is going to be really fun to watch, I think, over these next couple games. Maybe he just fully locks in his spot no matter who comes in. We'll see what happens there. So something to keep an eye on. Last thing I'll say, this upcoming game is our penultimate regular season home game. That's crazy how we're coming up on that already. End of the season coming up here against Loudoun United this weekend. I will also mention it's the Hispanic Heritage game, so definitely go out for that. Always fun for me personally to see my community celebrated like that. So appreciate the Rowdies as always for that. It'll be a great game, like we've mentioned. I mean, hopefully it's an offensive, you know, display for the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Right. That's a great way to put it. And yeah, hopefully it's a good way for us to rally our confidence and rally the boys going into this last stretch of games. So my call to all of you listening is that, well, I mean, you got to go. Be there for this team. Be there for the last couple of games. Rally around this club. And you know, we know the players on the team. This is a team that responds to good energy from fans. A lot of passion on this team from the roster. You know, a lot of emotion from guys like Lawrence Wyke and now Phil Breno too. Having watched this past game, guys that really respond well to the crowd behind them. So excited for that. Excited to watch that from here and hoping to see a good atmosphere from the TV. James, anything to add there?
No, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I am looking forward to this game because I think that we will be able to get some confidence out of it. And I sure would like to have a nice goal fest. This should be a game that I can actually attend after several home games that I've missed for one reason or another. And I would like to go out there and let's say get my money's worth. But sure. Yeah, that should do it for us this week. And we want to say thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Again, please go and do something for the people who are suffering from Hurricane Ian. We need to, as a community, everybody I think needs to do more when it comes to, you know, helping homelessness. There are several homeless people that live near my house, and I you know, choose every day effectively not to do something by not giving them something. So if you think about that problem, and then you think about all of the people who are suffering now, who are, you know, without everything that they had just this time last week, obviously the devastation is pretty bad. And, you know, you can donate money. You can also donate time, but there are lots of ways that you can make sure that there are, some avenue to help people, and please do that. But let's move into now just to say, please follow us as well on at RBLR Sports. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can get at me if you'd like on Twitter. You can use the hashtag AskRBLR, or I am at RBLR James K. What about you, Carlos?
Yeah, come drop a follow at Carlos GPA10. Like I said earlier, especially if you're from USL HQ and looking to offer me an internship, at Carlos TPA10. My last few tweets have all been about this game against Monterey Bay FC. Like I said, it was very, very satisfying, this game in particular. For some reason, the fans were like super hostile towards Aaron Guillen in particular. I have no clue why. Every time he touched the ball, they were booing him. I never really figured that out. I went to my sources over in the Ralph's Mob Discord and went to see if anybody had anything as to why I might have missed something about that. Just a very strange, I'm not gonna say anything bad about their crowd, because selling out for their last home game is always really awesome to see for the USL. But I don't know, I guess personally just a very satisfying win, staying up that late and seeing the boys come out victorious. Very gritty win. And yeah, I mean, always fun to throw in some random memes that I have saved on Twitter, trying to ratio, the other team on Twitter and whatnot.
There you go.
Whatever. Come follow me on Twitter, help support my ratio crusades here. And maybe, we'll get into Rowdies talk. I don't know. I always tweet about other things too. Georgetown soccer this weekend is going to be really fun. So come learn about college soccer if you want to as well. So at Carlos TP at 10, that's where you'll find me.
Yeah, Alec Papadakis, if you're listening, you gotta follow Carlos.
That's what I'm saying. Come drop a follow. We'll discuss the contract details later, but yeah, we'll start the conversation on Twitter if you want to. There you go.
Exactly. So please like and subscribe to our podcast. That also goes to Alec Papadakis. We are on Spotify and iHeartRadio app. We are on Apple and Google Podcasts. We are on YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. Wherever you are, we are as well.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for paying attention to me and James rant here for the past hour. I know it was a bit of a longer episode, but the weather, the hurricane last week put us back a little bit. Couple games to recap and a fun game to preview in the Loudoun United game this Saturday. Follow us on RBLR Sports, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot. Again, and like I'll say every episode, like and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. And what else is there to say other than come on, you Rowdies?
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.